Hi, my name is Chris Buck, and I am your child social studies teacher here at Calico High School. I've been teaching here for about 16 years now. This is my 16th year. This is my first job for teaching that I got right out of college. I went to Millersville University, graduated there a while ago, and a little too long ago now. Met my wife there. I'm married. We got married pretty quickly after college. I currently have 4 kids. Actually, today is my youngest son's birthday. But I have 4 children, ages 10, 8, 6, and 4. So they are certainly kind of my life and kind of dominate my time when I'm not here at school. And that's okay. That's a good thing, right? Kind of helps keep things in perspective, I think, when you have kids. But anyhow, so I graduated Millersville back in 2005. And then went on and got my master's degree. I'm currently working through in education. Currently working through my second master's degree in public administration, law, and public policy. And I teach civics and government. I teach world studies. I teach AP government and politics, and also teach AP European history from time to time. So I could have your student for any one of those, and I look forward to having them if I don't have them for one of those right now. Ultimately, what I want to do here is just kind of explain to you very quickly kind of the vision for all my social studies classes, and then go over the syllabus with you very quickly so you can understand the content that we'll be covering as well as the expectations for the class. So overall, my kind of view of my job here, because again, this is social studies, so it's a little bit different than some other classes like math or science. We get into sometimes controversial topics. I try not to stray away from them because, for better or for worse, all your students are growing up, and the state of Pennsylvania is going to consider them an adult pretty soon, and so is the United States of America. They're going to consider them an adult pretty soon. They're going to be doing very adult things, like getting a driver's license if they haven't already done so. Once they turn 18, they're going to be able to vote, all right? And that's a powerful thing. That's a powerful tool, and I try to explain that to all my students, no matter which class I'm actually teaching them. And so because they're getting to that age, one of the things that is kind of my job, besides teaching them the actual content. I want them to come out with a better understanding about who they are and why they believe what they believe. So we will kind of hit the controversial topics, more so in the 11th grade course than the 10th grade course, because again, they're a little bit older, they're a little bit closer to voting and stuff. But it doesn't mean that even when in 10th grade, in that 10th grade course, we still cover some controversial topics and some big, heavy topics, because unfortunately the world and world history has a lot of big and heavy topics in it, and just because they're uncomfortable doesn't mean that the students shouldn't be aware that these questions and that these situations haven't ever happened and don't exist. So I wouldn't say I use kid gloves, but of course we're doing it in a sensitive kind of way when these topics come up. But we talk about big topics like morality. Where does morality come from? Where does our morality come from? Is there absolute morality that we can 100% of the time say this is always wrong, right? And we have conversations about that, and if that's true, well, where did that come from? We'll have conversations about justice. We'll talk about laws. In all my classes, we'll talk about laws. Well, where do laws come from? What are they based off of? Well, every single law is based off of somebody's idea of morality and somebody's idea of justice. Every single law. So we have to kind of have that conversation, those big conversations about morality and those big conversations about justice, and that's kind of a running theme throughout the course, right? Because when we talk about freedom of speech or freedom of press, well, why are those things important? Who said that those things are right? How have we proven that these things are necessary to be in a free society? And when we're talking about what's happening in Africa, especially in world studies, well, we're looking at their history, and history is obviously made up of people. That's what makes it interesting. Nobody cares about names and dates. That's boring. I would fall asleep if that's all we were talking about. We're talking about people that really existed and people who had a belief. Well, why did they believe what they believed, and how did that impact how they interacted with their society? So we try to have big conversations like that, and so that's the kind of conversations I want to be able to draw out of your students. Now, I'll be honest, this is the most difficult it's been in my going on 16 years of teaching to do that, because we're virtual half the time, and even when I've got your students in front of me, they've got a mask on, I've got a mask on, and it just seems to inhibit some conversations. So we're getting there, even though we're through a couple weeks now of school. We're getting there, and we're starting to have more and more conversations. But one thing I would encourage you to do is encourage your child to have conversations in class. whether it's virtual, which we're going to be doing a lot more live streaming stuff here soon. We finally got some kind of things worked out that we can do that more, or whether they're in person. I need to have those conversations, and we need to have those conversations to make this class, one, interesting, but two, relevant to them and useful to them, so they can start to kind of form their own opinions and have their own thoughts. Immanuel Kant, the philosopher, he described people as immature, even adults as immature, if they only believed what other people had always told them. They kind of have a foundation built out of sand. When their beliefs that they think that they believe are challenged for the first time, I don't want that challenge to happen for the very first time when they're 25, because they've believed it for the first 25 years of their life, and now somebody really challenged it, and they never really thought about it. And now what happens to that foundation, right? It kind of breaks away very easily. And so I don't want that to happen now. So if we can start to kind of question some things and challenge some preconceived notions that maybe they have or that society has, and just kind of get to the root of, well, what do we really believe about some stuff, then they're going to be more prepared for the future. And so that's kind of really one of my biggest goals here, is to make them a mature person, not necessarily emotionally. They might always be immature emotionally, but I want to make them mature in the sense that they have a good understanding about why they believe what they believe. Even if they're only 15 or 16, they can still start to build that foundation using logic and reason and facts, right? And as well as some actual personal experiences, but making them start to become mature in that way. And I think that they will start to have an appreciation for having had that foundation start to be built. And oftentimes I'm building off of a foundation that you guys have already started to build in your own kids, right? But sometimes, and I've even seen this as a parent myself, sometimes kids need somebody who's not their parent to tell them the exact same thing, and then they're like, oh, okay, I don't know, maybe you've never experienced that. Maybe your kids listen to everything you ever said. I don't know. But I know with my own kids, sometimes they need some little outside voice, another coach or somebody to say the exact same thing that I just said. And all of a sudden, a light goes on, and they start to actually take it a little bit more serious. So that's kind of my goal for this class. Besides, obviously, I've got a lot of content that we're going to cover to give them a lot of knowledge to prepare them for the future. But I really want to prepare them in those other ways as well. So what I'm going to do next here is just very briefly, because I don't want to bore you, I'm going to quickly go over the syllabus so you have an understanding about the content and the class expectations for your particular student. Okay, so here we have the Civics and Government syllabus. And I won't insult your intelligence by reading you the entire course description, and also none of us want to take that much time necessarily to do that when you have it necessarily in front of you. But the main point of this course is really to kind of give your students the foundation of understanding the American governmental system, the political parties that they have, and we'll do that by looking at historical documents. We'll do that by analyzing the different civil liberties that we have within this country, and of course the governmental powers that also we see as well. So the general topics for this course will be the fundamentals of economics, and we already talked about supply and demand and economic systems like capitalism and socialism and communism. We talked about a little bit about GDP and GNP and supply and demand side economics and monetary and fiscal policy. So we don't really get real deep into the weeds with economics, but we really try to hit that real surfacey so they have a basic understanding about it, because for better or for worse, our government and our economics are tied together now. And so if we're going to really have a good evaluation about government, we need to at least have some basic understanding about economics. So we've already covered that. We've also talked a little bit about the purpose of government. Why does it exist? For the most part, it exists because people want to be secure. They want to be safe. And we talk about that. We also, within that, though, talk about morality. One of the assignments that your student already would have had was that they would have had to have read a piece by C.S. Lewis about something called natural law, which is it's a belief that we are born knowing the difference between right and wrong, and this has been the norm throughout most of history. So most governmental systems were actually made with the idea that we all agree on a certain morality. So, like for example, we're talking about the big stuff here. We're not talking about whether or not you should do 45 miles an hour in a 35 miles an hour speed limit zone. We're talking about the fact that, so the main argument would be that there's never been a society that's ever said that you should just kill whoever you want whenever you want. We call that murder, all right? There's never been a society that's ever said you should just steal anything that you want. There's never been a society that's ever rewarded you for being a coward in battle. in fact, quite the opposite. They would, in most societies, kill you outright if they saw you run away in battle. And so if we've never seen a society that's ever rewarded those things, well, what does that mean? What does that tell us about morality? Are those things that are somehow ingrained in us as human beings? And so we try to have these, and again, we don't necessarily come up with, and I certainly don't tell them yes or no to this. It's just to kind of breed this conversation. One, to get them to read some light philosophy and start to think about things that they never thought about before in ways they never thought about before. But also, two, to get them to start to understand, again, that really one of the main purposes of government is to establish justice. I mean, it's in the preamble of our Constitution. Well, what does justice mean? Well, every sense of justice is defined by the morality of that people. And so we try to just kind of get to that main point. Again, we're not getting into like what you should believe. We're just getting you to understand that concept that morality and justice and government are all kind of intertwined in a way that a lot of people don't necessarily realize. We then move on to the American governmental system, and we'll cover the history of this country and the different founding documents that we've used, right? The founding fathers. We'll talk about the history of it a little bit as well. I will actually make them read the U.S. Constitution. They will thank me for that later, but I figure about 99% of the American population has never done that. So not only are we going to read the U.S. Constitution, but we're actually going to look to see what it actually really means, right? And how can we apply this to what maybe is happening in the news, right? When somebody says, well, that's unconstitutional. Okay, well, is it? What kind of justification are they using to make that determination? Then we'll talk about the civil liberties, which this tends to be students' favorite unit here because we get into all of our freedoms, our freedom of speech and press and religion, the rights of the accused, the fact that you've got the right to a lawyer. Well, what happens, and we'll even talk about specific scenarios. What happens when you get pulled over? If a cop tells you to get out of your car, do you have to? Are you allowed to record the police? Should you record the police? Are they allowed to search your car on a traffic stop? And how is that different than if they come up to your door and say, hey, we would like to come in and search your house? All right, and so all the different requirements there. We also talk about their rights here at school. If the school decides, well, we're going to do a random drug test, are they allowed to do that, or does that somehow violate the Fourth Amendment? So we'll get into all different kind of discussions that kids usually have a lot of questions about, and so we have some really good discussions there. We will talk briefly about local government because that does have an impact on all of us, more so than what a lot of people realize. And we'll wrap it up talking about political parties. And then with part of that is really also talking about elections. So we're at a great time, actually, where there's lots of fodder in the news for us to be able to talk about elections. Obviously, we're going through the presidential election. We can talk about the debates after they happen. We might even watch one or two of the debates, or at least maybe even just clips of it, and we'll talk about what those topics mean. And we're, again, trying to make this class relevant to them. In terms of what we're actually going to be doing in this course, some major projects are listed here. I reserve, unfortunately, the right to change any of these at any time or modify them at any time because right now, with COVID, this class typically depends a lot on collaboration, and we just can't do it the same way as we used to. So some things will be changing, unfortunately. The one thing you can ask your student about is this final POD portfolio. This is actually their final project. It's worth 10% of their entire grade. They already got the assignment on the first or second day of school, and so they can actually be working on this anytime throughout this entire semester. They don't want to procrastinate on this. It's not actually a hard project. It just takes some time. And so they can be working on that even right now. Homework, I don't give a ton of homework out in this class, and probably actually even less so right now just because of so many unknowns right now. I try not to overload kids with homework, but they will get some. Class participation, I expect them, as I mentioned before, to participate in class. We need that kind of class participation, and so that is a healthy thing for our class for that to happen. The course assessment plan, what you'll see here, is actually basically thrown out. Those are weighted grades. So, for example, examinations were typically 35% of their quarter grade. Performance tasks, which are like basically projects, were 25%. I didn't feel that I could necessarily properly weight things right now because of so many different unknowns again right now. So right now they're just being graded on pure points, right? So they're still getting points for their things. They're still getting grades. They're still getting feedback on those grades. I'm just not weighting it by categories anymore. And then their final examination grade is actually 20% of their entire class grade, but their final exam I broke up actually into two different things. Their final exam is actually broken up between the final exam, like the actual exam that they'll have to take, and the final project. So that way, not the entire 20% of that grade is completely relying on a test, Right, so I broke it up into 2 different parts, basically 50-50. So that final project I mentioned before, the portfolio, that is also worth 10%, and the final examination is 10%. Just give you the grading scale here for Cacalico. Late work and missing work, if they didn't turn something in for some reason, they can still turn it in late. If you see a 0 in there somewhere in PowerSchool, tell them to get it done. As long as it's still the same quarter and we're still in the same quarter, I can't go backwards into a different quarter, but if we're still in the same quarter, they can turn it in, and so they should absolutely do that. An examination, failure, and retake. Hopefully none of your students ever fail a test, but if they do, for some reason, they should come see me and plan to take a retest within 5 days of the original examination being entered into PowerSchool. All right, so they got that 5-day window there to both come tell me, plan it, and to actually do the retake, and then they will be able to get some of those points back. And lastly here, before we are done, my contact information, obviously this is always on the web and everything as well, but my email address is cbuck@cacalico.org. Please feel free to email me anytime if you have questions or concerns about your particular student. I don't know everything about your students, and I see them even less right now, so if there's something that you feel like I should know, please reach out to me. Happy to have those conversations. And so, again, if you have any questions about anything that I talked about, feel free to reach out to me. You can give a call to the school or email me. All right, I look forward to the rest of this semester, and yeah, have a great day.